I'm Clara Coleman, and I've spent my Saturday mornings at the Knoxville Farmers Market for 3 years running. But this morning felt different. Maybe it was the way the spring air carried hints of jasmine, or how the vendors seemed more animated than usual. I was hunting for fennel pollen, that elusive golden dust my recipe book promised would transform ordinary dishes into culinary magic. "Excuse me, do you have any fennel pollen?" I asked the herb vendor, a weathered man with dirt under his fingernails and knowing eyes. Before he could answer, another voice chimed in from beside me. I was just about to ask the same thing. I turned to find myself face to face with a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a vintage photograph. Blonde hair caught the morning sunlight, and her blue eyes sparkled with an intelligence that made my breath catch. She wore a flowing sundress that moved like music when she shifted her weight. "Great minds," she said, extending a hand. "Nicole Jones." Clara Coleman. Her handshake lingered just a moment too long. The vendor chuckled. "You ladies are the second and third people this month asking about that fancy stuff. Got some right here." He produced a small glass jar filled with golden powder that looked like fairy dust. "What are you planning to make?" Nicole asked as we both reached for our wallets. "Grilled salmon with fennel crust." "You?" "Roasted vegetables for a dinner party." I'm terrible at cooking, but my guests are musicians. They appreciate experimentation. The vendor cleared his throat. "Only got one jar left, $25. Nicole and I exchanged glances. The moment stretched between us, electric with possibility. "How about we split it?" she suggested. "And maybe share cooking tips? I could use the help." "The Garden Cafe makes excellent coffee," I heard myself saying. We could discuss fennel strategies. 20 minutes later, we sat across from each other at a small table, the precious jar between us like a peace offering. Nicole's laugh was musical, literally. When she mentioned being a composer, everything clicked into place. "What kind of music do you write?" "The kind that keeps me awake at 3 a.m. She stirred her cappuccino thoughtfully. "I'm working on a symphony. It's been my obsession for 2 years. "Where do you compose?" "Coffee shops mostly. Anywhere with good acoustics and minimal interruptions." I found myself leaning forward. "Have you tried the library? The Eastern Reading Room has incredible natural acoustics. Mozart himself couldn't ask for better." Her eyes widened. "You work there?" "I manage the place, 23rd and Cumberland." "The brick building with the gargoyles?" "Those aren't gargoyles. They're griffin bookends. Much more literary." Nicole laughed again, and something warm unfurled in my chest. This woman was dangerous to my carefully ordered world of catalog systems and quiet afternoons. "I might take you up on that offer," she said, finishing her coffee. "The space, or the fennel advice?" "Both." We divided the precious pollen like diplomats splitting territory, but the real negotiation was happening in the spaces between our words. When she looked at me, I felt seen in a way that made my skin tingle. "Same time next week?" Nicole asked as we prepared to leave. "The market or the coffee? Why choose?" Walking back to my car, I caught myself smiling at nothing in particular. The fennel pollen felt warm in my palm, but not as warm as the memory of Nicole's laugh echoing in my ears. 3 days after our farmers market encounter, I was cataloging rare manuscripts when she walked through my library's front doors. Nicole Jones, looking like she belonged in this temple of books with her canvas messenger bag and that same flowing energy I remembered. "You weren't kidding about the acoustics," she said, approaching my desk with that smile that made my pulse quicken. "The Eastern Reading Room? I tested it yesterday, hummed a few bars of Beethoven. The sound practically danced off those walls." I stood, smoothing my skirt unnecessarily. "Need somewhere to work today?" "If the offer still stands." The Eastern Reading Room stretched before us like a cathedral of knowledge. Tall windows cast geometric patterns across polished oak tables. I'd always loved this space, but seeing it through Nicole's eyes made it feel magical again. "This table gets the best natural light," I said, running my fingers along the smooth wood surface. "And it's far enough from the main floor that you won't be disturbed." "Perfect." She unpacked sheet music, a small keyboard, and earbuds. "You're an angel, Clara." Angel. The way she said my name made something flutter in my chest. I tried to return to my cataloging, but found myself stealing glances through the glass partition. Nicole worked with intense focus, occasionally humming melodies that drifted through the quiet air like incense. Her fingers moved across the keys with practiced grace, and I wondered what those hands would feel like against my skin. The thought startled me. I'd never been one for workplace fantasies, especially not about women I'd just met. But there was something about Nicole that disrupted my usual careful boundaries. Around 4 o'clock, I brought her tea, Earl Grey with honey, the way I liked it myself. "You didn't have to," she said, but her smile suggested otherwise. "Library policy. We keep our composers properly caffeinated. How many composers frequent this place? You'd be the first." She laughed, that musical sound I was already addicted to. "Then I'm honored to pioneer new territory." "What are you working on?" Nicole's expression grew serious. A symphony about transformation, about becoming who you're meant to be, even when the world expects you to stay the same. The words hit deeper than they should have. I'd spent my entire adult life being exactly what everyone expected, the reliable librarian. The organized sister, the woman who dated appropriate men at appropriate intervals. "Sounds powerful," I managed. "Music should challenge people, make them feel things they're afraid to feel." Our eyes met across the small table, and something electric passed between us. I felt exposed, as if she could read the thoughts I barely admitted to myself. "I should let you work," I whispered, backing toward the door. But I didn't go far. I spent the rest of the afternoon finding excuses to walk past the Eastern reading room. Each time, Nicole was lost in her composition, occasionally pausing to make notes or replay a section on her keyboard. At closing time, I knocked softly on the glass. "We're locking up." She looked surprised. "Already?" I completely lost track of time. Good music has that effect. We walked toward the front entrance together, our footsteps echoing in the empty building. At the door, she turned to face me. "Thank you, Clara. For the space, the tea, the sanctuary. Will you come back tomorrow? If you'll have me." Standing there in the evening light filtering through stained glass windows, we were closer than librarian and patron should be. Close enough that I could smell her perfume, something light and floral that made my head spin. "Same time?" she asked. "I'll be here." She reached out, touching my arm briefly. "Good night, Clara." The simple contact sent warmth shooting through my entire body. I watched her walk to her car, noting how her dress caught the breeze, how she moved with unconscious grace. Back in my apartment that night, I couldn't concentrate on anything. The book I'd been reading lay forgotten on my coffee table. Instead, I found myself wondering what Nicole's symphony sounded like, what transformation meant to her, whether she felt the same strange pull I did when we were in the same room. I had a feeling tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. Nicole became a fixture in my library over the next 2 weeks. Every afternoon, she'd settle into her corner of the Eastern reading room, transforming my quiet sanctuary into something alive with possibility. I'd catch fragments of her melodies drifting through the building, and each note seemed to rearrange something inside my chest. On a Thursday evening, she mentioned her coffee shop performance. "It's nothing fancy," she said, packing her keyboard. "Just me, a piano, and whoever wants to listen. Tomorrow at Grind Coffee on Market Street." "What time?" 8 o'clock. "But you don't have to." "I'll be there." The words came out more decisive than I intended. Nicole's smile in response made my stomach flip. Friday evening found me changing clothes 3 times before settling on a simple blue dress that brought out my eyes. I arrived at Grind Coffee early, claiming a small table near the makeshift stage area. The space buzzed with conversation and the hiss of espresso machines. When Nicole appeared, my breath caught. She wore a flowing black dress that moved like water, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. She looked nervous, beautiful, completely magnetic. "Good evening, everyone," she said into the microphone, her voice softer than usual. "I'm Nicole, and I write music about the things we don't always know how to say." Her fingers found the piano keys, and the first notes silenced the room completely. The melody was haunting, complex, filled with longing that seemed to speak directly to my soul. I'd never heard anything so beautiful. Halfway through her set, she began a new piece. Her eyes found mine across the crowded room, and she spoke into the microphone. "This one's for someone who showed me that sanctuaries can be found in the most unexpected places." The melody that followed was different from the others, warmer, more intimate. It felt like a conversation between her fingers and the keys, like she was sharing a secret meant only for me. Around us, the coffee shop faded away until there was nothing but her music and the way she looked at me while she played. When the song ended, the applause felt distant. All I could focus on was how Nicole's smile seemed to light up the entire room, how her eyes never left mine, even as people congratulated her. After her set, she made her way through the crowd to my table. "So?" she asked, sitting across from me. "Incredible. All of it. Even the one about sanctuaries? Especially that one." We walked out together into the cool evening air. Market Street was quiet, except for the distant sound of traffic and our footsteps echoing off the pavement. "Want to see something?" Nicole asked as we reached the corner where our paths would normally diverge. Instead of heading toward the parking area, she led me down Cumberland Street toward the library. Under the streetlights, the building looked different, more mysterious. The Griffin bookends cast long shadows across the front steps. "I come here sometimes," Nicole said, leaning against the brick wall. "After performances, something about this place calms my nerves." "You get nervous performing?" "Terrified, every single time." She laughed, but there was vulnerability in it. "Tonight was different, though, knowing you were there." We were standing close now, close enough that I could see the flecks of silver in her blue eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "Clara," she said softly. "Yeah? I've been thinking about you, more than I should." My heart hammered against my ribs. "More than you should?" "More than is probably wise for two women who barely know each other." The honesty in her voice made something break open inside me. All the careful walls I'd built, all the reasons I gave myself for keeping safe distances, crumbled in the space between one heartbeat and the next. "I've been thinking about you, too," I whispered. The words hung in the air between us like a bridge neither of us was sure we should cross. But then Nicole stepped closer, close enough that I could feel her breath warm against my cheek. "Is this crazy?" she asked. "Probably. Good crazy or bad crazy? I don't know yet." She reached up, her fingers barely grazing my cheek. The touch sent electricity straight through my entire body. "Can I kiss you, Clara?" I couldn't speak, could only nod. When her lips met mine, the world shifted on its axis. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, like we were both afraid the other might disappear. But then I responded, my hands finding her waist, pulling her closer against the brick wall of my beloved library. She tasted like coffee and possibility, like everything I'd been afraid to want but couldn't stop thinking about. When we finally broke apart, both of us were breathing hard. "Damn," Nicole whispered against my lips. "Yeah." We stood there for a moment, foreheads touching, trying to process what had just happened between us. "This changes things," she said. "I know. Are you okay with that?" I looked into her eyes, at the vulnerability and hope I found there, and realized I'd never been more certain of anything in my life. "Ask me tomorrow," I said, but I was smiling when I said it. Saturday morning brought a text from Nicole that made my coffee mug tremble in my hands. "Want to see my favorite composing spot? It's about an hour outside the city." I'd barely slept after our kiss outside the library. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt her lips against mine, her hands pulling me closer. The memory made my skin flush with heat I'd never experienced before. "Send me the address," I texted back. The drive took us into the Smoky Mountains, winding roads surrounded by spring wildflowers and rushing streams. Nicole's directions led to a small cabin tucked between towering pines with a wraparound porch and windows that seemed to invite the forest inside. "My aunt left it to me," Nicole explained as we pulled up the gravel drive. "She was a painter, said this place spoke to creative souls." The interior was rustic but comfortable, with exposed beams and a stone fireplace that dominated one wall. A baby grand piano sat in the corner, positioned to catch morning light from the large windows. "It's perfect," I breathed. "Wait until you hear the acoustics." Nicole moved to the piano, her fingers finding keys I was beginning to recognize. The melody from her coffee shop performance filled the space, but here it sounded different, richer, more intimate. "Play the Sanctuary song," I said, settling into the couch facing her. She smiled, transitioning seamlessly into the piece she'd dedicated to me. Watching her play in this setting was mesmerizing. Her whole body moved with the music, blonde hair catching sunlight as she swayed with the rhythm. When the song ended, she turned to face me. "Your turn. I don't play anything. Everyone has music in them. What did you love as a child?" I thought back to afternoons spent in my grandmother's living room. She used to read poetry aloud. Emily Dickinson, mostly. I memorized dozens of her poems. Recite one. "Here? Now? Please." I stood, feeling suddenly self-conscious. But something about Nicole's encouraging smile made me brave. I chose one of my favorites, letting the words flow in the rhythm my grandmother had taught me. Wild nights, were I with thee. Wild nights should be our luxury." Nicole's hands found the piano keys, improvising an accompaniment to match the cadence of my words. The combination was magical, poetry and melody weaving together into something entirely new. When I finished, the silence stretched between us, heavy with possibility. "That was beautiful," Nicole said softly. "So was the music." She rose from the piano bench, moving toward me with that same fluid grace I'd noticed that first day at the market. "Clara, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I've never felt this way about anyone before. This fast, this intensely." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Neither have I. I don't want to scare you off." "You won't." She reached up, cupping my face in her hands. "Are you sure?" Instead of answering with words, I kissed her. This time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. Her lips were soft and warm, and when she responded, deepening the kiss, I felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. We moved together toward the couch, hands exploring tentatively, reverently. Nicole's dress was soft under my palms, her skin warm where it met mine. Every touch sent sparks through my nervous system. "Is this okay?" she whispered against my neck. "More than okay." She pulled back to look at me, her blue eyes dark with desire. "I want you, Clara, but only if you want this too." "I do. I want you." The fireplace cast dancing shadows across the room as we discovered each other slowly, carefully. Nicole's hands were gentle but sure, mapping the geography of my body like she was memorizing a new composition. When she touched me, I understood for the first time what all the poets had been writing about. We made love with the tenderness of first-time lovers, and the passion of souls recognizing their match. Every kiss, every caress felt like a revelation. I'd never experienced anything so intimate, so consuming. Afterward, we lay entwined on the soft rug before the fireplace, my head on Nicole's shoulder, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on my arm. "Was that your first time?" she asked quietly. "With a woman, yes. Any regrets?" I lifted my head to look at her. Her hair was mussed, her lips swollen from kissing, and she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. "None," I said, and meant it completely. "Good." She pulled me closer. "Because I'm not planning to let you go anytime soon." Outside, evening was falling over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Inside, wrapped in Nicole's arms, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged for the first time in my life. 3 weeks after our mountain cabin weekend, Nicole had essentially moved into my apartment. Her keyboard claimed permanent residence on my dining table, sheet music scattered across every surface. I'd never been happier living in organized chaos. We'd fallen into an easy rhythm. Nicole would spend afternoons at the library, working on her symphony while I managed the daily operations. Evenings belonged to us. Cooking dinner together, sharing wine on my small balcony, discovering each other in ways that still made my pulse race. Tuesday night started like any other. Nicole was working on revisions to her second movement, while I graded papers for the literacy program I volunteered with. The familiar sounds of her composing provided a soothing backdrop to my work. Around 11:30, we decided to call it a night. "Come to bed," I said, closing my laptop. "Your symphony will still be there tomorrow." 5 more minutes, she mumbled, but she was already saving her work. I was brushing my teeth when the first alarm started shrieking. Fire alarm, piercing and insistent. My blood turned to ice. "Nicole." She appeared in the bathroom doorway, eyes wide with alarm. What is that? The acrid smell of smoke answered her question. I grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the front door. The hallway was already filling with hazy gray smoke, emergency lighting casting eerie shadows on the walls. Stairs, I gasped, covering my mouth with my sleeve. Other residents were emerging from their apartments in various states of dress and panic. Mrs. Chen from 4 Billions clutched her cat carrier. The college students from down the hall stumbled out in pajamas, looking dazed and frightened. The stairwell was a bottleneck of people and confusion. Nicole's hand gripped mine so tightly I thought she might break my fingers. We moved as quickly as the crowd allowed, the smoke getting thicker with each floor we descended. Outside, fire trucks were already arriving, their flashing lights painting the building in alternating red and white. Paramedics set up a triage area on the sidewalk across the street. The whole scene felt surreal, like watching someone else's nightmare. 3rd and 4th floors, I heard a firefighter report into his radio. Looks like it started in 3C. My apartment was on the 4th floor. Nicole and I stood on the sidewalk, watching orange flames lick at the windows we'd been looking out of just minutes earlier. Jesus, Nicole whispered. All your books, your photographs. The reality hit me then. Everything I owned, every memory, every carefully curated piece of my life was potentially going up in smoke. I felt Nicole's arm wrap around my shoulders, anchoring me to the present moment. Ladies, you can't stay here. We turned to find a middle-aged man in a bathrobe approaching us. I recognized him vaguely from the mailboxes, but had never spoken to him. I'm David Morrison, 2A, he said. You're from the 4th floor, right? You need somewhere to wait this out? Nicole and I exchanged glances. We hadn't even thought that far ahead. My place is on the safe side of the building, David continued. Got coffee, blankets, whatever you need. That's incredibly kind, Nicole said. Are you sure? Wouldn't offer if I wasn't. David's apartment was a mirror image of mine, but filled with books on engineering and model airplanes hanging from the ceiling. His wife Sarah emerged from the bedroom, immediately taking charge of making coffee and finding us clean towels. Smoke gets in everything, she explained, bustling around the kitchen. You'll want to wash your faces, hands. Trust me. We settled on their couch, Nicole's head on my shoulder, watching the fire through their front window. The flames seemed smaller from this angle, less apocalyptic, but no less devastating. How long have you two been together? Sarah asked, settling into the opposite chair with her own mug of coffee. About a month, I said, realizing how inadequate that sounded. Newlyweds then, David smiled. That's nice. You can start fresh together. The assumption that we were a couple didn't faze either David or Sarah. In the midst of disaster, their casual acceptance felt like an unexpected gift. What do you do? Sarah asked Nicole. I'm a composer. Was working on a symphony upstairs. Was it backed up? David asked, with the practical concern of an engineer. Nicole's face went pale. Oh damn. My laptop's up there, but the external drive is in my purse, I finished, remembering. I grabbed it when we ran out. The relief that flooded Nicole's features was worth everything. Her music, her passion, her future, all safe in my leather handbag sitting by the door. See? You two are already taking care of each other, Sarah observed with a knowing smile. We spent the rest of the night on their couch, taking turns dozing while the fire department worked. Nicole's fingers traced patterns on my arm, and I realized that losing my apartment didn't feel like the end of the world, not with her here beside me. By dawn, the fire was out. The damage assessment would take days, but one thing was clear, we wouldn't be going home anytime soon. Moving into Nicole's studio apartment felt like trying to fit 2 lives into a space designed for one. Her keyboard dominated the living area, leaving barely enough room for the air mattress David and Sarah had loaned us. My salvaged belongings fit into 2 garbage bags, everything that survived the fire reduced to practical necessities. This is temporary, Nicole kept saying, as if repeating it would make the cramped quarters more bearable. We'll find something bigger soon. But I didn't mind the closeness. After losing everything familiar, being pressed against Nicole every night felt like home. The domestic intimacy surprised me. Making coffee together required negotiated choreography in her tiny kitchen. Sharing closet space meant my conservative librarian wardrobe mingled with her flowing dresses and vintage scarves. We were learning each other's rhythms in ways I'd never experienced with anyone. You squeeze toothpaste from the middle, Nicole observed one morning, grinning over her coffee mug. You leave sheet music everywhere except the piano, I countered. Fair point. 2 weeks into our cohabitation, my sister Stella arrived unannounced. I heard the sharp knock, and opened the door to find her standing there with crossed arms and a disapproving expression I remembered from childhood. Clara, we need to talk. Nicole looked up from her keyboard, immediately sensing tension. I can go for a walk. Stay, I said firmly, then turned to my sister. Come in, Stella. Stella swept into the small space, taking in the intimate chaos with obvious distaste. Her gaze lingered on the single bed, the mingled belongings, the unmistakable signs of a shared life. So it's true then, she said without preamble. Marcus told me you were seeing someone, but I didn't realize you were living together, and I certainly didn't expect... She gestured vaguely at Nicole. Didn't expect... What? A woman, Clara. Since when are you gay? The word hung in the air like an accusation. Nicole's fingers stilled on the piano keys. Since when does it matter? I shot back, feeling my cheeks burn with anger and embarrassment. It matters because you're my sister and I'm concerned about you. This isn't like you. Moving in with someone you barely know, changing your entire life orientation. Are you having some kind of breakdown? I'm having some kind of breakthrough, I said, moving to stand beside Nicole. And I don't appreciate you barging in here making judgments about my life. Stella's expression softened slightly. I just want to understand. 6 months ago, you were dating that accountant. What was his name? Richard. Now suddenly you're playing house with a musician? Richard was boring and safe, and everything I thought I was supposed to want. I took a deep breath. Nicole is everything I actually do want. Nicole reached for my hand, squeezing gently. The simple gesture gave me strength. I love her, Stella, and she loves me. That's all you need to understand. The admission surprised even me. We hadn't said those words yet, Nicole and I, but standing there defending us to my sister, I realized how completely true they were. You love her? Stella's voice was quieter now. After a month? Sometimes you just know, Nicole said softly. Sometimes the heart recognizes what it needs before the mind catches up. Stella studied Nicole for a long moment, as if seeing her for the first time. What do you do, besides music? I teach private piano lessons. Compose for local theater productions. I'm working on a symphony that might get performed by the Knoxville Orchestra next season. And you make enough money to support both of you? Stella, I warned. It's okay, Nicole said. I understand her concern. She turned to face my sister. I make enough to cover my half of expenses. Clara's not dependent on me, and I'm not dependent on her. We're partners. The conversation continued for another hour, Stella's hostility gradually melting into reluctant curiosity. She asked about Nicole's family, her education, her long-term goals. By the time she left, she wasn't exactly warm, but she wasn't actively disapproving either. That went better than expected, Nicole said, after the door closed. You think so? She didn't storm out, and she shook my hand when she left. That evening, we lay tangled together on the narrow bed, processing the confrontation. Did you mean it? Nicole asked in the darkness. When you told her you love me. My heart hammered against my ribs. Yeah, I did. Good. Because I love you too. She turned in my arms, finding my lips in the dark. The kiss was different from our others, deeper somehow, weighted with the promise we'd just made. My audition is next month, she whispered against my lips. I know. If I get this, everything changes. Recording opportunities, maybe touring. I know that too. And you're okay with that? I thought about it seriously. The uncertain income, the unpredictable schedule, the possibility of long separations. 6 months ago, I would have run from such instability. I'm okay with anything, as long as we figure it out together. Nicole pulled me closer, and I felt the last of my old life slip away completely. The Bijou Theater buzzed with anticipation while I fidgeted in my front row seat, smoothing my dress for the 100th time. Nicole's symphony debut, the moment she'd worked toward for 3 years, composed in quiet corners and cramped apartments, finally coming to life on stage. She's going to be brilliant, Marcus whispered beside me. He'd driven over from Nashville specifically for tonight, bringing flowers and moral support. The orchestra members filed onto stage in their formal black attire, tuning instruments in the chaotic symphony that always preceded actual music. But I only had eyes for the wings, waiting for Nicole to appear. When she finally walked onto stage, my breath caught. She wore a flowing midnight blue gown that made her look like she'd stepped out of a classical painting. Her blonde hair was swept up elegantly, exposing the graceful line of her neck. She looked confident, radiant, nothing like the nervous woman who'd barely eaten breakfast this morning. The conductor raised his baton. The first notes of Nicole's symphony filled the theater, and I felt tears prick my eyes immediately. This was her transformation piece, the music about becoming who you're meant to be. Hearing it performed by a full orchestra was overwhelming. The first movement was gentle, questioning, like someone waking up from a long sleep. The second movement built tension, conflict between what was expected and what was desired. By the third movement, the music soared with triumph and self-acceptance. I found myself gripping the armrests of my seat, completely lost in the emotional journey Nicole had crafted. Around me, the audience was equally mesmerized. No one coughed, shifted, or checked their phones. We were all held captive by the power of her musical storytelling. When the final notes faded into silence, the theater erupted. Standing ovation, wild applause, people shouting bravo. I was on my feet immediately, tears streaming down my face, clapping until my hands hurt. Nicole emerged from the wings looking stunned, as if she couldn't believe what had just happened. The conductor gestured for her to take center stage, and she did, curtsying gracefully as the applause continued. Her eyes found mine in the front row, and her smile was radiant, triumphant. She blew a subtle kiss in my direction, and I felt my heart might burst from pride and love. After 3 curtain calls, the audience finally began to disperse. I made my way backstage, where Nicole was surrounded by congratulations and business cards from people in expensive suits. "Excuse me," I said to the small crowd. "I need to borrow the composer for a moment." Nicole broke away immediately, practically throwing herself into my arms. "Did you hear that? Did you hear them?" "I heard them. And I heard your music. Nicole, it was transcendent." She pulled back to look at me, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Really? Really? You're going to be famous, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life saying I knew you when?" "No," she said firmly. "You're going to spend the rest of your life saying you were there every step of the way." Marcus appeared with champagne he'd somehow procured, and we toasted. In Nicole's tiny dressing room, while she changed out of her gown. The space was cramped, filled with flowers from well-wishers and the electric energy of success. "To Nicole," Marcus said, raising his glass, "for proving that some dreams are worth the wait." To Clara, Nicole countered, "For giving me a sanctuary to create in." We drank, laughed, and rehashed every moment of the performance. But I could see Nicole growing restless, eager to be alone with me to process what had just happened. "You two get out of here," Marcus said, reading the situation perfectly. "Celebrate properly." Back in her dressing room after Marcus left, Nicole finally let the magnitude of the evening hit her. She sat on the small couch, staring at her hands. "I can't believe it actually happened," she said softly. "Believe it. You were amazing up there." She looked up at me, vulnerability replacing the confidence she'd shown on stage. 3 recording labels left their cards. And there's talk about performances in Atlanta, maybe even Nashville. That's incredible. It means traveling. A lot. It means leaving you behind sometimes. I sat beside her, taking her hands in mine. "It means your career is taking off. This is what you've worked for." "But what about us?" Instead of answering with words, I kissed her, deeply, passionately, trying to pour all my love and pride into the connection between our lips. She responded immediately, her hands tangling in my hair, pulling me closer. "Clara," she whispered against my mouth. "Shh. Just feel this moment." We made love on the narrow couch in her dressing room, surrounded by flowers, and congratulations cards, still high on the triumph of her performance. Every touch was electric, charged with the energy of the evening. Nicole was more confident than usual, more demanding, as if her success on stage had awakened something fierce and beautiful in her. When she touched me, I felt like I was flying. When I touched her back, she made soft sounds of pleasure that drove me wild. We moved together with desperate intensity, celebrating not just her musical triumph, but the deeper victory of finding each other. Afterward, we lay tangled together, Nicole's head on my chest, both of us breathing hard. "No matter what happens with the music," she said quietly, "this doesn't change us. Promise?" Promise. I believed her completely. After tonight, after everything we'd been through together, I couldn't imagine anything that could pull us apart. Success changed everything and nothing. Nicole's symphony was picked up by Nashville Records, leading to a whirlwind of meetings, interviews, and recording sessions. But every evening she came home to our tiny apartment, exhausted and exhilarated, falling into my arms like she'd been holding her breath all day. "I found it," she announced one Thursday evening, bursting through the door with more energy than I'd seen in weeks. "Found what?" "Our apartment. Clara, you have to see this place." She pulled up photos on her phone. A spacious 2-bedroom in the Arts District with hardwood floors, tall windows, and a corner that would be perfect for her piano. The rent was more than we'd been paying, but between her new recording contract and my recent promotion to head librarian, we could manage it. "The bedroom has built-in bookshelves," she said, scrolling to the next photo. "The previous tenant was a literature professor." "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious. I already put in an application." I studied her face, searching for any hint of doubt. Moving in together officially felt like crossing a bridge we couldn't uncross. But looking at her excitement, her certainty, I realized I wanted to cross it. "Okay," I said. "Let's do it." Nicole's smile could have powered the entire building. Moving day arrived with Marcus and a rental truck, plus David and Sarah from our old building, who'd become unexpected friends through our shared disaster. Even Stella showed up, carrying coffee and what looked suspiciously like an apology. "I brought muffins," she announced, setting a bakery box on our new kitchen counter. "And I wanted to say something." Nicole and I exchanged glances, unsure what to expect. "I was wrong," Stella continued, her voice quieter than usual. "About you two. About this." She gestured around the apartment. "Watching you together these past few months, seeing how you support each other, I get it now." "Stella," I started, but she held up her hand. "Let me finish. I was scared because this wasn't the life I pictured for you. But it's clearly the life you chose. And Nicole, you make my sister happier than I've ever seen her." Nicole stepped forward, extending her hand. "Thank you for saying that." "Don't thank me yet. I still plan to embarrass you both at family dinners." We spent the day arranging furniture and discovering how our individual pieces fit together in this new space. Nicole's piano found its perfect spot by the bay windows. My books lined the bedroom shelves like old friends settling into new homes. Everything felt right, in a way that made my chest tight with happiness. That evening, after everyone had gone home, and we'd collapsed on our new couch, surrounded by boxes, Nicole pulled out a bottle of wine she'd been hiding. "To new beginnings," she said, filling 2 glasses. "To us." We drank and talked about our plans for the space, how we'd arranged Nicole's recording equipment. In the second bedroom, where we'd put the reading nook I'd always dreamed of having. Normal couple conversations that felt revolutionary to me. "I have something else," Nicole said, setting down her wine glass with unusual nervousness. "What?" She disappeared into the bedroom, returning with a small wrapped package. "It's not much, but I saw it and thought of you." Inside was a first edition of Emily Dickinson poems, the binding worn soft with age. I recognized it immediately as something expensive, something she'd saved up for. "Nicole, this is too much." "Open it." On the title page, she'd written an inscription in her careful handwriting. "For Clara, who taught me that love is the bridge between two minds. Always yours, Nicole." I felt tears prick my eyes. "It's perfect." Read the marked page. I flipped to a ribbon bookmark and found one of my favorite poems, but with new meaning after everything we'd been through together. The words about finding someone who understood your soul completely seemed written specifically for us. "Thank you," I whispered. "For everything. The book, this apartment, this life we're building. Thank you for taking the leap with me." We made love that night in our new bedroom, surrounded by unpacked boxes and the promise of tomorrow. It felt different from our previous encounters, less desperate, more settled. We were claiming this space as ours together, marking it with our shared passion. Nicole's hands mapped my body with familiar tenderness, finding places that made me gasp and arch against her. When I touched her back, she whispered my name like a prayer, like a promise she intended to keep forever. Afterward, we lay entwined in our new bed, moonlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, creating patterns on the walls we'd wake up to together. "No regrets?" Nicole asked softly. "None." "You?" "Just one." My heart stopped. "What?" "I wish I'd found you sooner." I kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against my chest. We found each other exactly when we were supposed to. Outside our new windows, the city settled into sleep around us, but inside our walls, everything was just beginning. 1 year later, I stood in the eastern reading room of my library watching. Nicole set up her keyboard for what she'd called a private concert. The same room where she'd first worked on her symphony now held fairy lights and a small audience of our closest friends. Marcus sat in the front row, grinning. David and Sarah held hands like newlyweds themselves. Even Stella was there, fidgeting with anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Nicole began, her voice carrying the confidence she'd gained over months of professional performances. "A year ago, I met someone in this very building who changed my entire world." My heart started racing. We'd talked about marriage in abstract terms, but this felt suddenly beautifully concrete. Clara taught me that love isn't just inspiration for music, it's the foundation that makes all other music possible. She began playing, but not her symphony this time. Something new, something I'd never heard. The melody was gentle, hopeful, unmistakably romantic. Around the third measure, I realized she was playing our story. The market meeting translated to tentative notes. Our first kiss represented, by soaring harmony, the fire depicted in urgent minor key passages. When she reached the final movement, she looked directly at me. "This piece is called Our Forever Symphony, and it's not quite finished yet." The music paused. Nicole stood up from the keyboard, walked over to where I stood frozen by the biography section, and dropped to one knee. "Clara Coleman, will you help me finish this piece? Will you marry me?" The ring was simple, elegant, exactly what I would have chosen for myself. But more importantly, it was offered by hands that had first touched mine over fennel pollen, hands that had shown me what passion felt like, hands that had held me through fire and fear and the most beautiful transformation of my life. "Yes," I whispered, then louder, "Yes, absolutely yes." The room erupted in cheers as Nicole slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, like everything else between us seemed to. "Kiss her already!" Marcus shouted from the front row. Nicole stood, cupping my face in her hands. When our lips met, I tasted tears, laughter, and the promise of everything we'd build together. 6 months later, we held our ceremony in the library's main hall, surrounded by towering shelves and stained glass windows. The guest list was small but perfect. Marcus served as Nicole's best man, Stella as my maid of honor, both of them weeping openly during our vows. "I promise to be your sanctuary," I said, looking into Nicole's blue eyes, "and to support every symphony, every dream, every wild idea you bring home." "I promise to love you like music," Nicole replied, "constantly, creatively, with everything I have." The reception was simple. Cake and champagne in the Eastern reading room, surrounded by the books that had witnessed our entire love story. Nicole played piano while guests danced, her wedding dress flowing around the bench like water. "No regrets about marrying a musician?" she asked during our first dance. "Only that we didn't do it sooner." Impatient librarian. Devoted wife. The words felt wonderful on my tongue. Wife, partner, forever. Later that evening, we sat alone in our apartment, still wearing our wedding clothes, sharing leftover cake and talking about honeymoon plans. Nicole's latest composition played softly in the background, something she'd written about new beginnings. "So what happens now?" I asked, curled against her side on our couch. "Now we live happily ever after." That simple? That complicated? She was right, of course. Marriage wouldn't make the challenges disappear. Her career still demanded travel, odd hours, the constant uncertainty of artistic life. My job required steady presence, predictable schedules, careful planning. We'd have to keep choosing each other every day through whatever came next. "I love you, Mrs. Jones," Nicole said softly. "I love you too, Mrs. Coleman Jones." We'd hyphenated, naturally. Two identities becoming one family without losing what made each of us unique. Outside our windows, Knoxville settled into another ordinary evening. But inside our walls, we were just beginning the greatest composition of our lives, a love story that would play on long after the final notes faded. The transformation Nicole had written about in her symphony was complete. We'd both become exactly who we were meant to be, together,